welcome to Wordsmith by Accident, a channel where I aim to, I suppose, express myself through written words and explore some of my favourite poems by famous authors, poets, all the like. This week I will be performing one of my own poems that I wrote late last year, I think I wrote it, and then I will be going through and breaking it down so you ever need it for English literature. It's called Freedom. I spent years blaming myself how we ended all those years ago. Stupid fucking puppy love came crashing down, a blissful period shattered in a moment. I was like a prisoner in my own mind. Surely I had to be responsible for that day. Years spent dodging love so as not to hurt another, only to find I wasn't the cause. Outside influence ripped us of our happiness, but we grew as people, and I'm glad we maintained friendship, because even now, I'd never tell you. However, I still care, and I still want you to be happy, because you've always deserved that. As with a lot of my poems, it tends to focus on past experiences and mental health issues, because I'm an unapologetic mess, and I hope that by sharing these things with people and expressing them, it encourages people to not only do this themselves, but to understand that you are not alone. And I suppose that's kind of why I write what I write. But that's it for this. For now, I shall cut to me going through some of the language used and explaining why I chose certain words, things of that effect. And I will leave a transcript, I suppose, if you will, in the description should you want to read it and analyse it yourself. Hello, and hopefully you've just listened to me perform the poem before you today. This is, of course, Freedom. I wrote it, I think, December of last year, just as the year was coming to a close. So, usually a happy time. Apparently not if you're in my brain. So, first of all, obviously, I spent years blaming myself how we ended all those years ago. Of course, it alludes to something happened. I'm not going to go into too much personal detail here, because of course there are other people involved, clearly. But of course, I spent years, for a really long time following what had happened, I blamed myself, and I think that's normal in these kind of situations. We tend to find fault within ourselves for things that don't quite go as we intended, and it's that kind of that realization of it all, of just, oh yeah, no, this must have been me. Like, no one else could have done this. The next line, of course, stupid fucking puppy love came crashing down, suggests that while at the time I may have believed it to have been a real love, and I think in some ways it possibly was, but looking back at it as an adult, because of course, teenage love is never true love. I'm not saying, no, not never, very rarely. Of course you can find your childhood sweetheart, and you have power to you, but obviously looking back, I was just in love with the idea of being in love. I wasn't in love, if that makes sense, which then alludes to the next line, a blissful period shattered in a moment. It was a period of bliss. I was happy, like I was joy. I woke up every morning with this kind of relaxed vibe to my life, and then just in one moment, the singular moment, I felt it all ended. It was all done. It was gone. Like, it was not there anymore. And like, I'm very concise with my language, I like to find. So the sentence, a blissful period shattered in a moment, it's very to the point. It gets it across. However, the line after that, I was like a prisoner in my own mind. That ties back to the first two lines of blaming myself and not being able to get out of this idea of blaming myself. Like every time I would think back on it, or if I told people of what had happened, I would explain it as if I was the perpetrator, as if I'd done what I'd assumed was the cause of this shattering of that moment, I suppose. And again, moving on, like, surely I had to be responsible for that day. Like, again, it reiterates that I blamed myself, and in my mind, only I could be responsible. There was no other way. I did not blame anyone else involved. I never do. I very rarely do, because that's just not who I am. I will always take blame and I will always apologise, which obviously can be to my own detriment. And then the next line, this is more of a dive into my psyche, I guess, because years spent dodging love so as to not hurt another. That was true. Because of what had happened, because I was so engrossed in blaming myself and picking apart everything I'd done, my behaviour, everything up until, well, we'll find later on, but I didn't get close to anyone. I pushed people away. I didn't allow myself to feel what I had once felt, because I felt as if I did, I would just repeat my same mistakes. And speaking of repetition, only to find I wasn't the cause. Now this is where it shifts. This is where I begin. Obviously I'd already realised this, but in terms of the flow of the poem, this is where I begin to realise, hold on, it wasn't me. I was not the cause, and this comes from having a conversation about it with the person involved and them telling me to my face I wasn't the cause. And the repetition there, like the repetition sort of illustrates the fact that it didn't sink in at first. I had to take a moment to be like, hold on, what? Did you just... No, this... What? And I didn't react outwardly towards them because I didn't want them thinking, like, as far as I'm aware, they don't know the effect any of this had on me, because I'm very good at protecting people like that. I don't like people knowing when I'm in a bad place as a result of mutual actions, that kind of a thing. But the repetition there is me coming to terms with the fact that I wasn't to blame. And I guess some backstory on this, that had been almost 10 years since what had happened, and me realising I wasn't the cause. That's quite a long period of my formative years where I'm like, oh hold on, I'm not the cause? What? And then this is furthered in. Outside influence ripped us of our happiness. Because as it turned out, it wasn't something I'd done. It wasn't something they'd done. It was a third party that had caused us to feel like we weren't compatible. And that was difficult to hear. That was really difficult to hear. Because I think I'd come to terms with accepting that I was to blame. But I wasn't. And that was the thing. That was the hard thing. That was understanding of it. And then we, and like I've said, but we grew as people. And I'm glad we maintained friendship, because I still talk to them. We're still close. I must still talk to them, otherwise I wouldn't have found all this out. I wouldn't have a poem. But we both grew. We are very different to who we were. I'm different, they're different, but because obviously I was growing with this guilt, I'm going to go with guilt, I became different to how I possibly could have been. But I didn't dwell on that. It did me no good to dwell on that. And then this, because even now, I'd never tell you, is the sort of notion that I wouldn't tell them. I wouldn't tell them any of this. I mean, if they hear this poem, they will likely have a good guess what it's about. But, you know, if that comes up, I'll explain. But until that point, and I'm not hiding it from them. If they ask me, I'd tell them, but it's a question they don't want to ask with an answer I don't want to give. And then, of course, however, I still care and I still want you to be happy. I substitute the word care a lot for more sort of heavier, deeper meaning words, because of course certain words carry very different connotations, and connotations I may mean. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say I don't. Still, part of me still doesn't, you know, part of me still does love them, and I will probably always will, because of course, you know, up there, puppy love, you remember it because it was formative. It's when you were a youth, you remember those feelings. You remember, like, the innocence of it, I guess. But I always want them to be happy. Always want them to be happy, because, like I said, they have always deserved that. Everyone deserves that. And it's writing things like this, where I'm not just dwelling on my own issues, that I realise I want to spend my life making people happy if I can. I want to help people, and I want to encourage that in others as well. Because, of course, if you come back to the title of this poem, freedom, it comes from the idea that, you know, like, the entire story here, the narrative, if you will, comes from the idea that, you know, I spent years blaming myself, only to find I wasn't the cause, and that outside influence had ripped us of our happiness. However, I still care, and I still want them to be happy, because they deserve that. And that has been the performance and breakdown of my poem Freedom. I've been Wordsmith by accident, and if you liked this video, please leave a like. If you didn't dislike it, I don't mind. Comment telling me what you thought of the poem, how I can improve, how I can grow. And if you want more videos like this, please do subscribe, and always remember, you can express yourself. Thank you.